What springs to mind when I ask you about your religious or spiritual background?
Well, I grew up Unitarian Universalist. My mother was a single mom and was looking for community, rightfully and wisely so, to help her in raising her kid by herself. And so she found a UU community, or actually found friends in my hometown that suggested she try out a UU community. So what I think of when I think about growing up as a Unitarian Universalist, I think a lot of, especially my high school experiences in youth group, and just how formative those were, because that was the time when it felt like I was, as all adolescents are, trying to figure out who I was, what was important to me, what wasn't important to me. And it was the connections in my youth group more so than any other connections I had in high school that were the ones that really grounded me and helped me feel like I knew that what I was discovering to be true about myself was my truth, and that I couldn't and shouldn't let anybody take that from me. And those were the people who really, there's a feminist theologian who used to say that people sometimes love us into being and hear us into being. And I think that my UU community really did both of those things for me, both peers and adults, because it was what reminded me that you need to be loved by people outside of your immediate family as well. And so it was a great and safe place for me to figure out who I was. So that's part of what I think about. And just the rituals of, we went to church pretty much every Sunday. So just the ritual of going all the time and singing familiar songs and seeing familiar faces and exploring different kinds of thoughts and ideas.
And is there anything that you want to share about yourself or your family with others at church, especially other families, but folks in general?
Yeah, I think a lot of people in the church know a lot about my immediate family, although I think especially with coming out of COVID time, a lot of people are quite surprised to learn or be reminded of how old our children are now. So our son Demetrius just turned 10 and our daughter Athena turned 16 in March. And so she's going into grade 11 and he's going into grade 4. I think we've all weathered the pandemic relatively well, but I think the other big thing for folks to know is that it was a really hard time for us in terms of our extended family. So while our immediate family has remained kind of intact and bouncing about doing various things, we lost some relatives in the next generation up from us during the pandemic. And so it's definitely been a time of wading through grief and leaning on a lot of friends and other family members to kind of make sense of a lot of that. And so people in the congregation and families in particular were, over time, I think, hear a lot about kind of all the deep work that I in particular have been doing around sort of my father's death from COVID in December of 2020, and all the things that I've learned about him and about that side of my family and all the generations over the course of these couple of years. So for me, that's been probably the biggest takeaway of the last 2.5 years, is I'm back to talking to 2 uncles and 2 cousins from that side of my family monthly since my father's death, and learning a ton.
When has spirituality failed you, lifted you up, or surprised you?
I really loved this question because I realized, well, first of all, it's fascinating to think about all 3 of those things. And the first one I realized as I read failed you, I think that actually spirituality often has not failed me, but I have failed it. Because I think I give my spiritual life and my spiritual practices more and less attention at various times. And so it fails me when I don't attend to it. it surprises me all the time because insights, wisdom, understanding, the making of connections of sort of what's most important and why I'm here and my sense of purpose, all of those things, which I think are the biggest religious and theological questions. I come up with new answers all the time. And I don't know, spirituality can be, it's just such a journey. It's such a, you know, what you think you always knew, or what I thought I always knew, sometimes still works and still holds me. And then sometimes I need to add a new tool to my toolkit, and I need to go searching a little bit to figure out what that is. And actually, I find that these last couple of years have been a really great, with some of the other things kind of stripped away, it's been a lot easier to say, okay, this is what nourishes me. And this, so I'm going to lean into those things that are nourishing. And I'm going to put the things that feel a little more extraneous or a little less central to my being to the side. And I think because of all the various losses and things as well, it's also been really good at clarifying. I think it's been a clarifier of like, people matter, a sense of purpose and meaning matters. And some of the other, you know, trappings and odds and ends are less important. So actually, I think spirituality and kind of faith and figuring out what I still have faith in and what I still have hope in has actually become more central and is letting me down less these days than it has before, because I'm letting it down less. I'm more focused than I was for a while there, I think.
This feels like a loaded question to ask a minister, so don't make yourself a to-do list, but what do you hope our congregation will do together, both in the world and for each other?
Yeah, that's a big one. And I think the two are very related. I've been feeling, and I'm going to guess that a lot of people have been feeling lately, like there's a lot of harshness in our world right now. Despite all the admonitions to be kind, it feels like actually there's less kindness than there was 2.5 years ago, or at least we hear less about the kindness. So I'm hoping that within the congregation, we'll continue to focus on not only treating one another well, but learning from one another and growing, especially in our ability to be more inclusive as a community, that we'll figure out what that means, what radical inclusion would actually look like and mean in everything that we do. And then I'm hoping that we'll find ways to take that kind of vision out into the world. And that can take, you know, so many different forms, but to lift up that we believe in kindness and we believe in inclusion and we believe in finding ways to connect even across differences. Whether that's the GVAT work that some people in the congregation are doing, or finding other community groups that also want to work on housing issues or mental health issues, or whether that's us all as a community deciding there's some things we'd like to just go concretely do. Like, what if we go do a beach cleanup together, or figuring out some ways that we can just go and sit and show with what we do the kind of world we'd like to be living in, and where we see that it's not the world that we want, that we're inhabiting right now. So that's a broad way of talking about kind of what I'm hoping for. And I think it does start with kind of rebuilding our own connections to each other, because it feels like we've spent 2.5 years mostly on screens and mostly at a distance from one another. And we're still, I think, going to be spending the next several months at least learning or relearning what it means to be in community in more proximity to each other, and then how that impacts how we move in the world, and what that looks like in relation to all of our neighbors, and as our Indigenous friends would say, all our relations, right? How do we really move in the world in a way that's kind and humble, willing to learn, open to new ideas, and willing to basically just show up and be an ally or be a support, or because we don't have all the answers, right? So I'm looking forward to seeing what that next chapter looks like.
And just an open-ended question, is there anything else that you want to share with others at church? Anything coming to mind?
I think just that this is really a time of flux. So in the church, my sense is that I've been saying to people lately that the glass is both half empty and half full. That on the one hand, it feels to me like we've had wonderful energy and continued attendance throughout the pandemic, which I know has not been true for a lot of congregations. So I feel really grateful that people have continued week after week to tune in, or to now recently to start coming in person. And I think that says a lot for at least Sunday morning feeling like a touchstone for folks, like they want to touch in and have that regular reminder. And the glass is kind of half empty in the sense that we don't know what the future holds. And we see that things are not what they used to be. So we have to figure out what's next, and we have to figure that out together. And that there are increasing pressures, financial pressures on the church. Like the building is costing more to take care of. And there's just more that we have to be mindful of all the time now. And so I think it's really we're at this kind of pivot point of figuring out who are we becoming? And we don't yet know who we're becoming. We know who we've been, and we know we've had to change who we've been twice in pretty dramatic ways in the last 2.5 years. And we know that we're probably becoming yet a third big change, and we don't know what that looks like. So we'll just have to all kind of live into it together. The German philosopher Rilke used to say that sometimes we have to live into the questions, that we don't know the answers, but we live into the questions, and that someday then we find that there are some answers. And so I think we have to do that as a community with the guideposts of what our values are and our vision of kind of what it is that we want and long for in the world, holding us, and then kind of uncover what the next steps are together. So I'm, as a optimist, as a glass half full person, I will tell you that I'm excited about that, even though I know that for some people it's a little anxiety provoking to not have clear answers and to not have a guidepost or a roadmap that says here's what's going to happen, and in 6 months this will be what's going on. So I'm aware that feeling of flux, or that feeling of kind of both and the paradox of this moment can be challenging as well as an opportunity. And I think both things are true about this moment.
Till